Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my channel. Today we'll be taking a look at the 2024 the Chennai Grand Masters again. And today we'll be taking a look at a game played between Grandmaster Levon Aronian versus Vachier-Lagrave, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And these two players, they're actually really strong top grandmasters, and you might ask, why are we just looking at all of those games? Why am I doing recaps of these games or sharing these games with you guys? Well, sometimes actually just in general, studying these top grandmasters games can help you learn a lot of things. Well, maybe just in one game you might not learn anything, or just you might you feel that you haven't learned anything, but as you study more and more games, about 100 games, even 1000 games, and more of the more you study, the more you'll learn. And that is why I'm doing recasts of these top grandmaster games. And they can also sometimes teach you the basic things. For example, the openings, how can you play, for example, the Ro Lopez. Grandmasters, they can also teach you how to play these openings. Alright, now that is just a small topic that we're going to talk about. And now let's take a look at this tournament, the Chennai Grand Masters 2024. This tournament has already started for 5 rounds, and today it will be the 6th round. Now, there are actually some breaking news. Well, actually not breaking news, but this is an article that I want to share with you guys. Levon Aronian defeats Vachier-Lagrave, trails Arjun by half point. Now, still, Arjun Ergazi is in the lead with half point ahead of Levon Aronian. And let's see some more specific details by reading this article. Grandmaster Arjun Ergazi continues to lead the Masters section of the Chennai Grand Masters 2024 with 4 points after a draw with Grandmaster Parham Maksudlu in the 5th round. Trailing him by half a point is Grandmaster Levon Aronian, who defeated Grandmaster Maxime Vachier-Lagrave to reach 3.5 points. Aronian was the only winner of the day in the Masters. Yes, in that day, in round 5, there were 4 games and 3 of them ended in a draw. And this is the only game where there was a result, and Aronian won that game. In the Challengers section, well, actually that is nothing that we're going to care about. Today, we're just going to take a look at the Masters section basically. This is the standings, after 5 rounds in the Masters. This is the standings so far. You can see Arjun Ergazi is in 1st place, and Levon Aronian is right behind him. And yeah, there's nothing more there's nothing, yeah. That's just basically it. And today we'll be taking a look into this game. Oh, I'm showing it to you guys at the very end. But yeah. So this is the game where Aronian won against Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And yeah, let's dig deeper into this game. Levon is white, and he started with d4, the queen's pawn opening, and Maxime here started with knight f6, and c4 was played, g6. Now, at first sight, knight f6, g6, this can transfer into many openings. For example, the most common one, the King's Indian defense. It could also be the Grunfeld defense, or it can also turn into the opening that in this game has reached. Not knight, but f3 first, and c5 here. This is still part of the King's Indian defense, but as you see, after a few moves, it turns into something else. d5 was first played, and after d6, knight d3, e6. Now you might just figure out that just by looking at this pawn structure, it looks pretty much like the Benoni defense. Well, technically speaking, in this position, it is not it's not the Benoni defense, but the pawn structure in the center looks really alike. But this is actually called the King's Indian defense, the Alenkite anti-Grunfeld variation. Very long name. e6 was played, and e4. Now bishop g7. Still, this is very similar to the king's Indian as well, because you're like putting your bishop this way, like fianchetting your bishop. Bishop g7 and knight g2. And a6 was played. You see that black is just doing what black should be doing in the Benoni. In the Benoni, black is actually just like putting the pawns this way. Well, maybe like the pawn is not on g6 instead, the bishop will be on e7, but still, black is going for b5 ideas. And that is what Maxime is doing here. Levon played a4, very logical, to prevent b5 from happening, because if you just leave it there, for example, you let's say you just play a normal move like g3, and well, there's actually b5 possibilities here even. I'm not saying that it is the best move, but I'm saying that this is actually a possible move. Now, the main point is that you cannot take on b5. You might say that if black takes a takes b5, there will be like white will be up a pawn after knight takes b5. But actually, well, yeah, if you play like that way, white will definitely be up a pawn. But unfortunately here, black can actually take with e takes d5 first, and after, for example, let's say you take with the pawn, there's now just short castle. Black will leave everything, leave it there. And even though white is up a pawn, that's for sure, but white is now really like behind in development, as you can see. The king is still in the center, the pieces are still on the back rank, on the starting squares, so it's actually like black has a lot of compensation for the pawn. This is just something that I want to emphasize. Like b5 is actually a threat where white should definitely prevent with a4. And after queen e7, well, queen e7 is actually unnecessary. Here, black can actually just take on d5 with e takes d5, and after, like, there are basically three options here for white, either to take with the e pawn, c pawn, or with the knight. Let's take a look at them one by one. In the game, well, not in the game actually, in the game black even didn't take on d5. Let's say if you take with the e pawn, for example. Now probably there's just some short castle ideas or queen e7 to pin the knight and the king, something like this. White might be like struggling with his own development. So e takes d5 is actually not the best option. And let's say if you take with the knight, black will just happily take. And let's say, of course, if you take with the e pawn again, there's something like, well, even worse, there's queen h4 here, winning the pawn on c4. So basically you have to take with the pawn, and if you take with the queen, this will just allow like black to develop easily with knight c6, bishop e6 coming up. So of course you take with the c pawn, but if you take with the c pawn, now the main point is that black's bishop on g7 is now completely opened. Like this diagonal is actually really strong for the bishop, and actually I think black is just much better here with like initiative. That is why you should take with the c pawn. C takes d5 is the best move here. And after c takes d5, let's say black just develops with knight bd7, but of course we'll just develop the same with knight g3 and probably something like bishop e2 in the future, short castle ideas. It's actually very normal if like you play it that way. But in the game, however, queen e7 was played, which is not a bad move, but slight inaccuracy. Queen e7 was played, and now Levon here didn't play the best move. He also made a small mistake. Here he played d takes e6, which is giving back the advantage, giving back a small advantage. What he should have played instead is actually, well, the engine here says that the best move is to go g4, but this is just, like, in human eyes, this is just a move that is impossible. It's just impossible to find this move. But the second best choice is actually just to go knight g3. And actually this is very logical, just to develop the pieces and open up the diagonal for the bishop and preparing for short castle ideas. Knight g3 is actually very normal. But instead in the game, I'm pretty sure that Levon definitely saw knight g3, but he just wanted to like do something more like active or aggressive, and instead he played d takes e6, like opening up the center immediately and saying that I'm not going to play something that's solid, but I am going to attack your pawn on d6, and after f takes e6, you cannot take with the bishop. I mean, take with the bishop is not as good as taking with the pawn. Bishop takes e6, and now bishop f4, for example, like the queen and the bishop are all attacking the pawn, and here black's only way to defend it will be by going bishop f8, but this is just way too ugly for black. And that is why you have to take with the f pawn here. This is the best option, but still there is bishop f4. But the main difference is that now black can actually go e5 to block, and this is played in the game, and bishop g5 was played. Now threatening to go knight d5 because there's also this very annoying pin, and black definitely needs to get out of it. And suddenly you can see that this queen e7 move is actually just useless. It can't do anything there, and also allows white to go knight d5 by kicking the queen and the knight at the same time. And you can just figure out that queen e7 is not a good move. Bishop g5 was played, and now of course Maxime saw that there was knight d5 threats coming up, and he played knight c6, which is the best move. Because now if you go knight d5, which was played in the game, black just goes back to d8, and you're not losing any material, and you're just basically developing your own pieces. And also this knight has an excellent outpost on d4, which it is aiming to go for. Knight e3 was played in a game. This means that, okay, probably in the future, if I take on f6, or if this d5 knight is off the board, I'm going to get my other knight to d5. And also the other usage of this move is to open up the diagonal for the bishop to develop the rest of the pieces. In the game, knight d4 was played, jumping the knight to this excellent outpost. Even though this is an outpost, of course, an outpost is a square for the knight where the opponent's pawns cannot reach it. As you can see here, the c pawn and the e pawn are the only two pawns that are able to reach the d4 square, but now they have already been pushed to the 4th rank, and of course they cannot go back. And this knight here is just on d4, where it is untouchable by white's pawns, only by the pieces. For example, 92 offering a trade of knights, that is possible, but still d4 is considered an outpost for the knight. Knight d4 was played, and in the game, bishop d3 was played. Short castle and short castle. Alright, now, in this position, both sides has already got their kings to safety, and this is all about the middle game part, the calculations and the strategies that they have. Now, by looking at this position, you can see that on the king side, both sides, they don't have a lot of pieces there. The pawns are pretty much still at the beginning squares. They're not pushed that high up the board. Whereas in the center, the pawn structures are basically fixed, and both sides have two excellent knights on the opposing squares. On the queen side, this is where all the action will be happening here, for white especially, because white is threatening to go b4 at some point to open up the queen side to create counterplay, and that is one of white's main ideas. But now it is black to move, and black of course also is forming his own idea, not a clear plan, but first of all at least just to develop the pieces, or get rid of this d5 knight first. In the game, bishop e6 was played, and after here, knight e2, Levon decided to trade off this annoying d4 knight for this not so active c3 knight. Knight e2 was played, and black basically has to take, either waiting for white to trade or trading by himself with knight e2, which is actually a mistake. What black should have done instead is just wait for white's knight to take on d4. Just put the knight on d4, because this is an outpost, and just do something, for example, like bishop d5, and after c takes d5, for example, go b5. Now this position is actually pretty complicated. After a takes b5, you take with a pawn, and after knight d4, you first of all take on a1, for example. This is actually a big trade of pieces, and after e takes d4, even though here right now, white is up a pawn, but after queen b6, the b2 pawn is a huge weakness, and also black has these very strong passed pawns. So of course black has the compensation for the lost pawn. But it's actually a really complicated line, and I'm not sure if both sides have calculated all the way to that position. And here, knight e2 was played, and actually this knight e2 move, Maxime actually spent about 16 or 18 minutes thinking about this move. So I guess he definitely saw the other option with bishop takes d5, but thought that knight e2 was better. Well, this is just a miscalculation then. In the game, knight e2 was played, which is a mistake because after bishop takes e2, now this d file is still open in white's scope, and the d6 pawn is now a pure weakness. There are no other pieces that, there are no black's pieces to cover in front of the queen. Like you can see before, if let's just say, for example, king h8 was played, just like I'm giving the move to white right now, and let's say knight takes d4, and after c takes d4, you see that the knight's a trade-off, but you can see the d file is now opened because they're no, not open but closed, because there's a pawn which is blockading here, like on d4. But compared to this position right here, after knight e2, bishop takes e2, there are no pawns on d4, and the queen is completely open to the d file and attacking this weak d6 pass, not pass pawn, but isolated, not isolated, but backwards pawn. Yeah, it's called a backwards pawn. In the game, rook f7 was played, very logical move, but already after this knight e2 move, it is the start of disaster because black's only choice is to defend the d6 pawn and defend everything. Queen e2 was first of all played, and now you can just see and just enjoy Aronian's attacking methods and his way coordinating his pieces, maneuvering them to the best squares, and finding amazing tactics. Queen d2, queen f8 was played by Maxime. You can see he is now starting to play very passive moves, but it's the only way for him to keep playing the game on. Knight b6 was first played, very logical, attacking the rook, and after rook a d8, defending the d6 pawn, rook a d1, doubling up the major pieces on the d file, still mainly putting pressure on the d6 pawn. h6 was played, and now the bishop back. There are sometimes even bishop c5 threats here, which is even happening right now. And after rook c7, defending the c5 pawn, b4 was played. And after c takes b4, queen takes b4, this is all fine. Now white might have a small weakness, which is on c4, but right now it is well being defended by these three pieces, and the d6 pawn is still a weakness right there. It can never be pushed because the d5 square is well being controlled by white's pawns, as well as the other pieces, so this is considered as a backwards pawn. It can never be pushed. In the game, rook c6 was played, which is actually it's actually unnecessary. Rook c6, just increasing the advantage for white, because there's now just a5. Black is somehow helping white. White is gonna go a5 anyways, and yet you're helping white, or you're not doing anything to prevent that from happening. And I guess that probably at this point Maxime is probably already a little bit without any directions. He doesn't really know what to do in this position because basically he has too many weaknesses in the position, and Levon is just pushing really hard and giving a lot of pressure to black. h5 was finally played, and probably trying to create some counterplay on the king side. Also, probably bishop h6 ideas coming up, but still it doesn't really harm white. White first of all played knight d5. There are some trade that happen on d5, if black takes with the bishop after e takes d5, c5 is coming up, and if you take, of course you cannot take with the knight because that will be a fork right after there. So this means that after knight d5 you cannot take on d5, and in the game rook d7 was played, and after bishop d3 you see that Aronian is actually just maneuvering or getting the pieces to the better square, and it's clear that the bishop is going bishop c2, bishop a4 to this side of the board, and it's actually just unstoppable. In the game rook f7 was played, noticing that white is threatening bishop c2, bishop a4. Black is now getting the rooks away, and after bishop c2, still Aronian is keeping his plan going on. And after king h7, bishop f2. I guess bishop f2 is just slightly a bit solid. Bishop a4 is just working immediately, and if you go, for example, if you retreat the rooks back, there's now just knight b6, and after rook d8, probably something I don't know, bishop g5, pinning the knights and everything. This position is just way too painful for black to keep on playing. In the game, bishop f2 was played, and after rook c8, retreating the rook back, knight b6, rook d8, the d6 pawn is still the main character in this position. Like, if it falls, it's gonna be dead loss for black, and if it still, like, black finds a way to preserve it on the board, black might still have a chance to hold the position. Let's see how Aronian kept on like attacking the pawn. Well, actually, at this point of the game, he didn't want to if you just double the rooks on the default, it's not going to work because there's queen e7, bishop f8. Black will be able to hold this pawn. So the only way to really win the game or find a winning plan is actually by opening up the center and gobbling up the pawns. And in the game, c5 was played, the best way to play here. And after d takes c5, bishop takes c5, attacking the queen, getting all the pieces out and throwing them towards black. And now queen g8 was played, and after rook takes d8, queen takes d8. Now the main point is that even though material is still even, and both sides now have less weaknesses on the board actually, white has get rid of the d6 pawn, helped black get rid of the d6 pawn, but also at the same time getting rid of his own c4 weakness. And now at this point of the game, you can see that even though material is even, but the pieces, black's pieces are completely cramped on the king side and are just way too passive. And the rest of the game is just like Aronian playing very excellent chess. And he played rook d1 first, queen g8, bishop e7, bishop h6, trying to get the bishop to a better diagonal, but it doesn't work. Knight d5. Well, this is not a perfect move. Actually, because black is threatening to go bishop e3, you can actually just get away with king h1, but I guess this is not that not a human-like move. You can also just go queen d6, just throw all the pieces onto into black's territory, and now threaten to take the bishop as well as the pawn, and this should have just be clearly winning. Probably black's best try is to go queen e8, but after bishop d8, let's say you go, for example, rook f8, but this is actually just really hard to play this accurate. There's now even just some queen c7 checks, and yeah. The position, with accurate play for black might be able to hold the draw. At least white's advantage is not that high, but it's really hard for black to play it so accurate in this kind of position with all the pieces very passive and all the pressure on black's side. It's impossible for a human to play that accurate in this kind of situation. And in the game, however, Aronian didn't play the best winning move. He instead played knight d5, which is actually a mistake. And after bishop takes d5, e takes d5, still white is better. And here queen c8 was played. This is the most accurate defensive move. And after bishop b3, threatening to go d6. Probably this position, at this point in human eyes, white is just completely winning. But in the computer, just by looking at the eval bar, you see that it's only +1 actually. It's only +1, not that high. But I guess just in human eyes, it's a completely different evaluation. Bishop b3, e4 was played. Now this is actually a losing move here. e4 doesn't really do anything. The best defending move is actually to go knight d7. Just blockade the pawn from pushing ever, and after d6, for example, there's now rook f4. You're opening up the file of the rook, and if you go, for example, actually, it's not that easy for white to play in this position because the pawn is hard to push. d6, there's rook f4, and black will be able to find a lot of counterplay. But knight d7 was in all a really hard move to spot, but it's actually the only move to save the position. And other moves, and in the game, e4 was played just loses immediately after d6. And bishop e3 check, still trying to save the position, but after king f1, queen f5, queen c4, not even taking the rook, because if you take here, there's actually now e takes f3, and after this position, even black is having some chances to win here, because the king is actually now really weak, and it will end in a draw definitely. And of course, Levon is always that solid, and you spot that, of course. He played queen c4, threatening to take the rook with the queen, and after rook g7, there's now queen e6 offering or forcing a queen trade, queen b5 check, bishop c4 block, queen b2 threatening queen f2 checkmate, don't forget. And after bishop e2, blockading everything, knight g8, and here the winning move, the last winning move here is bishop f8. And here, after bishop f8, black just resigned the game because the rook is completely, I guess it's just simply trapped on g7. It can never get out. And d7, d8 is unstoppable. And here, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave resigned. And Levon Aronian won this game. He is now 3.5 out of 5. 1 half point behind Arjun Irigizi, so still he has some chances to go for first place. Now this is actually an excellent game played by Levon Aronian. Even at the end, he is still playing all of the best moves, knowing that after bishop f7, there's e takes f3. And yeah, I mean, you can just learn a lot of things from top Grandmaster games. The opening is actually really interesting. It looks like a Benoni, also looks like a King's Indian defense, but yeah, it's actually really interesting in the opening part. And then here in the middle game, you can always learn many strategies and the way to maneuver your pieces from top Grandmaster games. And in the end, you can just enjoy the beautiful win by the top Grandmasters. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this game as well as this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!